From the Evening Standard in London, I'm David Marsland, and this is The Leader.
The next station is Hounslow West. Please mind the gap between the train and the platform.
But if you're on that Piccadilly line train, you might want to skip a stop or two. Hounslow has just been added to a list of 8 areas in England that the government doesn't want you to travel to and from. The guidance is part of efforts to halt the spread of the Indian Covid-19 variant. But as local MP Ruth Cadbury pointed out on Twitter, here's where the Piccadilly line's heading after Hounslow.
This train is going to Heathrow Terminals 1, 2, 3 and 5.
The A4 to Heathrow also goes through the borough, making it quite hard to get to the airport without going through Hounslow. Did they look at a map? Asked Miss Cadbury. Nevertheless, guidelines are now in place, and if you live in Hounslow, you're even being asked if you really need to go on holiday this half-term. Vaccines Minister Nadhim Zahawi explained the new guidelines in the House earlier.
We're urging people in these areas to take extra caution when meeting anyone outside their households or support bubble, including meeting outside rather than inside where possible, keeping 2 metres apart from people you don't live with, and that people should try to avoid travelling in and out of the affected areas unless it is essential.
Our Deputy Political Editor Nicholas Cecil is here. Nicholas, this advice does seem to have come out of nowhere.
Well, that certainly does seem to be the case, that this guidance was dropped on a website late Friday, and the council leaders certainly don't seem to be aware of it, neither do the local public health chiefs. So this has really caused quite a lot of concern and surprise. The government aren't denying that it was properly announced. They're making some sounds suggesting that there was some communication, but there's no formal major announcement about this.
And the thing is that it is quite major. These are some pretty strict guidelines that people are being asked to follow.
Yes, these aren't actually legal restrictions, so that they're guidance, advice. But even so, they are very strict and can affect people's lives quite significantly. For example, one of them is to avoid travelling in and out of affected areas unless it's essential, for example, for work or for education. So it's advice, and it's saying if you can do this where possible. But even so, that's pretty stringent. And another piece of advice is to meet outside rather than inside where possible. Now, these new guidance applies to 8 areas: Hounslow, Bedford, Blackburn with Darwen, Bolton, Burnley, Kickleys, Leicester and North Townside. And it immediately raises a number of questions. For example, if you live in Hounslow and you're about to go on holiday to Portugal, to a green list country, can you do that anymore now? Because is that really essential? Many people would say that's not essential travel to go on holiday, even though people may desperately want to do that after such long lockdowns. The other question is, can people go to the pub indoors? Again, if you're not supposed to meet inside, if you can meet outside, if that's possible, then it may be harder to argue that you should go to have a drink with your friends in a pub indoors or in a restaurant.
Boris Johnson was always clear there'd be no local lockdowns. Is this a local lockdown by stealth, Nicholas?
Well, that's certainly the accusation being made by Labour, that there is a local lockdown by stealth. What Number 10 is saying is that this is guidance, is up to people to make the decisions. So it's a bit of a grey area, really. But for people who want to follow the rules and do their best to combat the Indian Covid-19 variant and other variants, then it probably will feel like lockdown restrictions in some shape or form.
And as the local MP had pointed out, can we go to Heathrow Airport if we have to go through Hounslow?
Well, that is still not clear. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, raised that this morning with the Vaccines Minister, Nadhim Zahawi. As far as I can see, at the moment you can go to Heathrow. There's no problem there. But certainly the local council leader, Councillor Steve Curran, he's described these new guidance as ridiculous and impossible to implement. He's put out a message saying that for one of London's most connected boroughs, with Heathrow on its doorstep, the M4 and A4 running through it, the Piccadilly line, the main line from Waterloo, plus the North Circular via Kew Bridge, to try and limit travel within its borders is not only impossible, it's a ridiculous idea. So that sums up certainly local feeling in Hounslow.
Again, this is the government being accused of making mistakes in its communications over coronavirus and the pandemic, and this is all coming just ahead of Dominic Cummings coming back into the public forum again.
Yes, so if Dominic Cummings needed something to set the scene for government poor handling of a COVID issue. Here the government has delivered it on a plate. So it set the tone that at best I'd have thought this is just poor government communication. It may be even something worse if the actual strategy may turn out to be flawed as well.
And that's The Leader. Never miss our news, interviews, features and analysis every day at 4 p.m. by simply hitting the follow button on your podcast provider. We're back tomorrow.